The one thing that I know in my knower is that I am not God. Because a lot of people will have a near-death experience and they're like, oh, we're all God. And I'm like, okay, I don't know that that's what they mean, or maybe it is hard to put words on it. So I can see where um, it gets rough trying to explain it. But in that moment, I knew that I was not God, that I was just this small speck in the universe that this God, for some reason, cared about, and he didn't have to. I'm pretty insignificant in the whole scheme of things. But I knew that he was there, and I knew that he loved me. And I'm talking loved me like adored me, was thrilled to see me. And I hadn't expected that. I had expected to be overwhelmed and have all those feelings about him. I didn't expect it to come from him first. And there was something about that that just set me off balance. And so I immediately kind of got defensive because I'm like, I could feel him knowing me, and it just, the whole thing was really weird. But in that moment, where I could feel him knowing me all the way to my core, everything about me, every thought, everything, I pulled back. And I knew that he couldn't do that without my permission. Or maybe he could, but he wouldn't. And so I pulled back, and I just wasn't sure. I had some issues with God, and I wasn't sure that I felt safe letting him in like that. And so he's there with me, and um, we're going to go through not really a life review, but just a couple of things. And I'm like, oh, great, And then I think of a couple good ones, and I'm like, okay, maybe he'll bring that one up. That's a super good one. I'm proud of that. Um,
Just cherry picking.
right. Like, that one. And so he says, this scene opens up, and it's like you're there, but you're an observer. And the first thing was a good scene, and it was me in this grocery store in this little Save-A-Lot in the little town that we lived in. And there was a woman in line in front of me, and she was 72 cents short. And she was trying to figure out what to put back. And as a single mom, I knew what that was like and how embarrassing it is. And it's embarrassing. I just remember being so ashamed that I had to put something back. And I could see her going through it, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. She's like, well, the kids like the macaroni and cheese. I don't really need this moisturizer, and you always short yourself because you're going to do the best for your kids. And so I fish around and I find the money and I hand it to her, and she's like, oh, no, no. And this is where we are in the world. She was ashamed to take 72 cents. I mean, what is that off me? That's nothing. That's nothing off most people. She would rather just go without some basic thing that she needs because we have it so ingrained in us, this idea of independence, and to have to need or rely on anybody else's weakness. And it's shameful. And I remember feeling that in myself under those same circumstances and just being profoundly grieved that other people felt that way too. And I'm like, wow, this seems like a small thing. I hadn't even remembered this till you showed me. And I remember like those words echoing, small thing, small thing, small thing. And then the whole scene opens up, and it's her years down the road, and she's working in a food pantry, and she's handing out groceries. And this woman comes in with exactly the same feeling that she and I had both had at other times in our life, ashamed that she's having to go and get free food. And the lady was like, it's okay. It's okay. I've been there. It's all right. I'm going to help you out. Everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, 72 cents. That's huge. Who knew, I mean, I would have picked a million other things that I had done that seemed bigger, but that was the thing. And he's like, you've got to realize your purpose is whatever I put in front of you that day, whatever person crosses your path. Everybody thinks it's this one big thing and, what's your gift? And that's the thing you're supposed to, it's not, it's a million things every day. It's that person that something's tugging at you to talk to that you don't talk to because you don't know them. It's kind of getting over ourselves to be able to see that and see where God needs you to work, because we all have that. I don't know. It just seemed like a small thing, and it wasn't the thing I was proudest of by any, but the ripple effect was huge. And so then I'm like, okay, well, now we're going to have to go through bad things. And boy, it seems like there's a lot of those to choose from. And, and so he pulls up this, scene of this woman that I used to work with that I could not stand. And so God showed me her life, and he showed me all the horrible things her dad had done to her as a little girl. And I just was stunned. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like she should be a monster considering what she endured as a little girl. And she grows up with nobody caring for her. The people that you're supposed to count on to love you, that you don't have to invest in that. You're a little kid, they just love you because you're their kid. It wasn't like that. He was, her tool, or his tool for pleasure. And I mean, how warped is that? And even with that going on, ever since she could remember, when she gets grown up enough to be able to decide what she's going to do with her life, she wants to help people. Now, is she great at it? No. But in that moment, God was like, you need to learn to control your thoughts. So I've never been a person to gossip, and I hate gossip. I think it is the single most destructive thing that people do. I felt like because I had never said anything bad about that nurse, that I hadn't really done anything wrong. And he said, you allowed yourself to entertain all these negative thoughts about her and to dislike her and to insult her in your own spirit, in your own mind. And that has energy. Yes, there's more energy if you speak it, and there's more energy if you act on it, but it all starts with a thought. When you malign somebody like that with your mind and in your own spirit, it's not without effect on them. It floored me because I'd always been so careful to not talk bad about people. Um, but I had not been good about controlling my thoughts. And I mean, sometimes they're deserved. I know some really crappy people. And I just thought it was interesting that that was the thing that he chose to show me, about controlling my thoughts. And as somebody who has to kind of work to be present and not always in my head, that's important. After my near-death experience, I was a mess. I people are like, "Oh, that's great. You were with God." And I'm like, "Okay, imagine a baby in its mother's arms, as loved as it's ever going to be, and somebody just ripping that baby out of its mother's arms and then throwing it into this hostile environment." That's what it felt like. I'm like, everything here is harder, it's more painful. I was still super sick. Um, it was just it was hard. And so I like started looking into all these different faiths and religions, trying to find truth and what did I actually believe, and what did I read that seemed right in my spirit. And I had read this book by Dr. Atwater, and it's something like 70% of people who have a near death experience end up divorced. And I thought, wow, that's
Really?
so tragic. And I looked at him and I said 70% of people who have a near death experience end up being divorced. And I have to ask you, is God going to be the one thing that pulls us apart? So here we're back now, and we've kind of gone through the good and the bad. And um, I realized that I have this opportunity to go deeper with God. And so there I am with this God who I've held responsible for all this stuff in my life. And and he wants me to come with him, but I have to let him all the way in to do it. And so I was like, okay, okay, I'm going to trust you. And as soon as I said it, the light from him started swirling, and it pooled at my feet, and it started coming up through my feet and through my legs. And it was so warm, and it got up into my middle. And where you have all that like visceral strain and nervousness, and where you just feel sick about things. Like everything that ever happens to you, it leaves this little visceral physical imprint on you. It's in there. They're like these little emotional scars. And his light was like this cloak wrapped around inside me, and it was healing all those things. And it came up and it went around my heart, and then it came up my neck and it went into my mouth, and I started singing. And I'm a horrible singer, and it was beautiful. I'm like, oh man, this is cool. If I go back, I want to keep this one. And so I squeezed my eyes shut because I didn't want it to get out, and it shot out my eyelids and out my eyelashes, and then it bounced off God's light outside me, and it rushed back in, and it went into my brain, and I could feel it going through every curve in my brain. All the things, I knew all the things, all of them. I couldn't tell you what they are now, but everything, I understood everything. Everything made sense. And I was like, "Oh my god," like, I knew that there were parts of my brain that I had never accessed before, and they were all working, they were all lighting up. I could see things like flowers, and each flower had its own color and its own vibration, and God had a vibration, a resonance, and it was the key of G, and I didn't know what it was until I got back, and we were at church, and this lady was playing this song in the key of G. It was such a strong reminder of what God sounded like that I had a hard time staying in my own body. I was like, "Okay, you can't, like, pop out because here at church and people think you're crazy and you already have social anxiety, so you don't want to add to that. And and I asked Don, I'm like, what is that? Is that like a certain key or what? Because he's a musician. And he said, that's G. And I'm like, we have to go up there. So after church, we walked up there. And I know she probably thought I was crazy. And I put my hands on the piano and I stood close enough to it that it was touching my abdomen and the tops of my legs. And I'm like, will you play that again? And I said, I died. And I was with God. And he resonates in the key of G. Could you play it again? And she did. She honored that. And I could just feel it all over again. Like he was back in me with all of that love and light. And I'm like, wow, that's just, and I hadn't even put together that's what it was until then. So anyway, he's going through, he's up in my brain. I'm knowing all these things. And then he's going to take me on this trip and we're going to go through the strands of my DNA. And I'm like, I didn't even know you could do that. And I'm like, wow, this is just crazy. And so, it's this spiral sort of thing. And we're going through it. And I can see, the chromosomes. I can see my genetic code. And as we're going through, I can feel the strands like going over my skin, like, like you'd stroke somebody that you love. And they're just brushing over me. And we're going through and we're going through. And then he stops. And it's like, and we were going super fast. And he just suddenly stops and it was jarring. And I was like, whoa, what? And he's like, do you see me? And I'm like, well, yeah, I see you. You're everywhere. I mean, how would I not see you? And he's like, no. And he points at my DNA and he said, right there, do you see me? And I looked and it was God. I'm like, you're in my DNA? He said, I built you. I made you. You can say it's not true your whole life, but we can get your DNA and prove it so. I knit you together in your mother's womb. I am in you. You just had to remember it. And that's it. That's all of us. He's in there. You just kind of have your slate wiped clean when you get here. And your whole journey is to figure that out, that he is in there. And how could you not love these people that you're in? So we get to that DNA and I see him there and I realize I have to make this decision about going back and that it's my decision to make. I had to decide whether to go back and I didn't want to go. And initially my knee-jerk reaction was no, of course I'm not going to go back. This is amazing. Yes, it's going to be hard on my husband and the kids, but they'll get here eventually. This is all over very quick. You have no idea how fast this goes, seconds. And I'm like, it all works out. They'll be okay. God will work it for good. And I just knew I was lying to myself. I don't know. It just felt bad. And I was like, Penny, he knit you together. He thought about you for a long time before he made you. And you got into that life and you let hurt take over. And you built yourself a cell and you locked yourself away in it and you didn't really live. And he designed you to live and he designed you to make a difference in the world. And yes, you can stay here now and he's not going to hold it against you. But do you feel proud of what you did? Even though it wasn't my fault, it was my reaction. And I was like, no, I feel like I've let him down. I feel like I haven't done everything that I could have done and like I haven't lived. And so I decided to go back. Well, as soon as I made the decision, I could feel him pulling away and it was just awful. It was like that baby being torn from its mother's arms. And I was like, wait, and I'm already crying. And he's like, what? And I said, let me remember it. If you don't let me remember it, I won't have any hope. Please let me remember it. And I woke up and I remembered it. And that nurse was sitting right there. And she's like, well, there you are. You're back. And I'm like, I was with God. And she's like,
immediately you said that?
First words out of my mouth. I'm like, she says, what? I'm like, just now I was with God. And she's like, oh, that's nice, dear. And I'm like, in a religious hospital. She's like, let me go get your family. And I'm thinking, she thinks I'm crazy. I was really with God. So they come in, the family comes in, and I'm like, I was with God. Just like a few minutes ago with him. And they're like, oh, that's good. And they're looking at the nurse like, is she going to be okay? And she's like, well, let's not get her all excited. It's her first day off the ventilator, so let's do some more visiting tomorrow and let her get some rest. And I'm thinking, man, I've been in a coma for how long? How much more rest do I need? And so they all leave and I'm laying there in the bed and God comes into the room, like the light comes into the room, scares the crap out of me. I scream and I'm like, oh, he laughs and he's like, what? And I'm like, well, I thought you were gone. He said, I'm never gone. I'm like, well, I know, but you don't just pop into rooms like that. That's startling, and he thought it was hysterical. And he said, I want to give you this message and I want you to share it with the world. And so he gave me this message. I didn't have pen or paper or anything. I actually didn't get to write it down until the next day. I don't think I shared that until summer of 2020, after I got over COVID, and I'd almost died from COVID. God was like, I asked you to share that, and for you to continue keeping it to yourself is theft. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'm not a thief. And so I pulled it up so I could read it to your folks. So when I had my near-death experience, God gave me this message to share with the world. God said, such folly to think anything escapes my knowing, as when you were with me, all at once, all that I allowed you to know, you knew. No words were spoken, nor were they shouted. I whispered them to your spirit. I discreetly filled you with knowing. Knowing flowed into you as effortlessly as taking a breath. Is it not so? The great I am. No truer words have ever been spoken or written. The great I am is in your core. The great I am is the light. Even when I am hidden, still I am. As my energy charge sending me over each synapse in your brain, even those small fibers knew that I am. They rose and fell to the rhythm I created, to the symphony I composed, I conducted. I consider it a tragic comedy of arrogance when man denies what the smallest innervation knows. Man thinks he acts and moves outside my knowledge. How could it be so? I proclaim he does not. His own fibers clutch themselves, laughing at the idea. I am the flower, the wind, the rain, the sinew, the marrow, the rock, the author, the maker, the touch that set in motion all that you see and all that you know, and all that you do not see or know. I knit you. I put breath in you. I am coded in every cell. Every nanosecond of time falls in step as I will it so. I am in you. I am in you. I am all. Even when you perceive nothing, still I am there. As I tell you this here and now, pressing my truth into your breast, your very heart presses it in further. And I just thought that was such a beautiful.
Whew.
It's just
Wait a
crazy.
minute. So that's the message that came to you, all of that entire.
That was
How the hell
what
did
he
you remember that?
gave me in the hospital room. Yeah. And it's funny because I remembered it the next day to write it down, even with fentanyl and whatever else was in my system. It was like I was there again with him when I started thinking about it. Because I remember thinking I
That's
didn't have
wild.
paper and I was really tired and I fell asleep before I realized it. And then when I woke up, it was the next day and I was like, oh my gosh, I was, how am I going to share that? I can't remember what he said. And so I asked for pencil and paper and I just closed my eyes and I wrote the whole thing with my eyes closed. It was all over the page. It's interesting to me that you would think my having a near-death experience would somehow make me less opinionated about the truth. Time's short.
They're the opposite. Shit.
Right? Yeah. I'm like, I can't not say it because it's true. I have to say it. People are being heard. I have to say something.